My name is Hera Vaughn and I am 29 years old. I had just bought my dream home and invited my entire family for a housewarming. No one showed. Instead, my mother's text arrived like a knife: "We're busy. Don't start drama." I stood alone in my new living room with food going cold, balloons sagging, and my phone buzzing with photos, my family laughing somewhere else, celebrating something they never even told me about. I felt my chest split open, like I'd been erased on purpose. But what they didn't know was, this house wasn't my only key. Not even close. And the reason they abandoned me that night would crack everything wide open. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. I used to think silence was my safest language. In our house, love had rules, and every rule began with my brother's name. He was the golden one, the firstborn, the future. My mother said it so often it became a hymn. I learned early that applause wasn't meant for me. When I got perfect grades, she'd glance up from her phone and say, "Good. That's what's expected." When he brought home AC, she'd hug him like he'd survived war. At the dinner table, my father sat quiet, buried in exhaustion, while my mother and brother filled the air with their stories. I became the background noise, the one who fetched the salt, cleared the plates, and filled silences with usefulness. I tried to insert myself once, talking about an art competition I'd won, but my brother interrupted, saying, "That's cute, but real success takes risk." My mother laughed softly. That sound stayed with me for years. It wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't. Birthdays forgotten. Achievements dismissed. I became invisible through repetition. And when I finally moved out, it felt less like independence and more like exile. But I told myself distance meant peace. Years passed. I built myself from leftovers, small jobs, smaller apartments, endless compromises. When I finally scraped enough to buy my dream home, it wasn't about showing off. It was about saying, "Look, I survived without you." I wanted them to see me once, just once, not as the quiet one, but as someone who had made something beautiful out of being unwanted. So I invited them all, for warmth, for closure, for maybe. I sent the messages, wrote the details, even added emojis so I wouldn't sound too desperate. I decorated with hope disguised as confidence. Every balloon, every candle, every plate was an apology they'd never give me. The night arrived. The table was set. The candles flickered. And as the minutes crawled by, silence filled the rooms again, familiar, suffocating, cruel. No one came. Then my phone buzzed. A single message. From my mother. 3 words that erased everything I'd built. "We're busy. Don't start drama." My throat tightened. I stared at the food cooling on the table, at the lights I'd strung by hand, at the home that suddenly didn't feel mine anymore. And then the second buzz came. A photo notification that would end whatever innocence I had left. When I first saw the house, I thought it was whispering to me. It sat at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac, framed by old oak trees that looked like they'd seen people start over before. It wasn't extravagant, just elegant, honest. A white brick front with a porch wide enough for laughter I imagined would finally sound like family. I told the realtor, "This one feels like peace," and she smiled the way people do when they don't understand what that costs. Every corner of that house became my confession. I painted the kitchen in soft amber because my mother hated yellow. It felt like reclaiming sunlight. I filled the shelves with books no one in my family would ever read, lined the counters with small plants that didn't need approval to grow. The night before the housewarming, I barely slept. I kept thinking, maybe this was the moment I'd break the family curse of pretending. Maybe if they saw the life I'd built, they'd finally say, "You did it, Hera. We're proud of you." I sent reminders that morning, cheerful and light: "See you at 6. Can't wait to show you the place." My brother replied with a thumbs-up emoji, the kind he used for charity announcements. My mother read the message but didn't respond. Still, I held on. By 5 o'clock, the table shimmered with effort, candlelight reflecting off wine glasses, plates arranged like invitations to redemption. I wore a white dress, simple but elegant, and sprayed the perfume my father used to say smelled like new beginnings. The food warmed the air. I even rehearsed my smile in the mirror, just in case I cried when I saw them. 6 came. Then 6:30. Then 7. My candles burned low, and hope began to flicker with them. I refreshed my messages over and over, whispering excuses for them, traffic, delays, misunderstandings, until the excuses felt more humiliating than their silence. When my phone finally buzzed, I leapt toward it with the kind of hope that hurts. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even from my mother's heart. It was her text, cold and cruel in its efficiency. "We're busy. Don't start drama." I stared at those words, reread them until my vision blurred, until anger and heartbreak fused into something dangerous. And as I stood there, the phone buzzed again, new notification, bright and merciless. A photo. My family smiling beneath a string of golden lights. Caption: celebrating the future. At first, I refused to believe what I was seeing. I told myself it had to be old, a memory they'd reposted, something harmless. But the timestamp mocked me, tonight, 7:12 p.m. I zoomed in on the faces, needing to be wrong. My brother's smug grin. My mother's glass raised mid-toast. My aunt's red lipstick curved into a perfect smile. My cousin's kid wearing the dress I'd sent for her birthday. They were all there. All except me. I scrolled, shaking, through post after post, each one slicing deeper. My family, my blood, was at a party. Not mine. Somewhere else. The same night, the same time. Laughter frozen in pixels, proof that I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. Deliberately. The captions were worse than the images. Family forever. Proud of us. New beginnings. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the background, directing the photo like a movie scene. She'd always wanted control of the story. And I had just been written out. My hands trembled so badly I dropped my phone onto the floor. It hit the tiles with a sharp sound that seemed too loud for the empty house. I sank down, staring at it, afraid to pick it up again, because every time I did, there was another picture. Another laugh. Another version of a family that looked complete, without me. When I finally forced myself to open the app again, a new photo had been tagged, a location. Not a restaurant, not a venue. A private address. One I didn't recognize, but I knew the neighborhood, expensive, manicured, unreachable. The kind of place my family always praised but could never afford. My mother was hugging my brother in front of a large fountain, her face glowing with pride. He held a folder in his hand, thick, official-looking, gold-trimmed. And the caption beneath it made my chest tighten until I could barely breathe. "The future begins tonight." My throat burned. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random. It was orchestrated. They hadn't just skipped my housewarming, they'd replaced it. I stood up, numb, grabbed my keys, and whispered to no one, "I just want to see." The night air hit my face like ice as I drove, headlights carving through the dark. The GPS confirmed the address. And as I turned into the glowing street lined with luxury cars, I realized I was heading straight toward the reason they hadn't shown up. The address glowed ahead of me like something out of a dream I wasn't invited into. Tall iron gates, security guards in tailored black coats, soft music spilling from somewhere beyond manicured hedges. My pulse hammered against my throat as the GPS announced, "You have arrived." I parked across the street, engine still running, headlights dimmed. My fingers clutched the steering wheel so tightly that my nails left half-moon marks in the leather. The house beyond those gates was enormous, columns, fountains, chandeliers visible through tall glass windows. The kind of house that screamed old money, though my family had none. For a long, disbelieving moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. But then, through the shimmer of string lights, I saw them. My brother stood at the top of the stairs, champagne glass in hand, his suit perfectly fitted, his smile rehearsed. My mother hovered near him, proud and glowing, like this night was hers too. Laughter floated out, familiar and cruel. My aunt. My cousins. Even my father's old friends. Everyone I'd fed, helped, loved, and begged to come tonight. They weren't missing my housewarming. They were celebrating something bigger. Something secret. I turned off the car and sat in the silence that followed. My reflection in the windshield didn't look like me anymore. It looked like a ghost, someone staring at the life that used to be hers. The valet opened the gate for another guest, and a glimpse of the backyard came into view, tables draped in gold linen, lights dripping from trees, the kind of beauty that costs more than apology. My stomach twisted as I realized they'd planned this for weeks. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to protect what little dignity I had left. But the curiosity, the pain, was stronger than self-respect. I stepped out of the car, cold air slicing my skin, and walked toward the entrance. The guards didn't stop me, they probably assumed I belonged. And in a way, I did. My heels clicked against marble steps as I reached the open doors. The sound of my brother's voice grew louder, confident, laughing, alive. He was giving a toast. And just as I crossed the threshold, the crowd erupted in applause. My eyes lifted to a banner above the staircase. Congratulations, Ethan, the Vaughn estate transfer ceremony. The words hit harder than betrayal ever could. Because the estate, our father's estate, wasn't supposed to belong to anyone yet. I stood frozen in the doorway, light and laughter spilling toward me like acid. My brother, Ethan, lowered his champagne glass mid-toast, his smile faltering only for a second when he saw me. My mother's face followed, her expression folding from triumph into irritation. Not surprise. Irritation. Like I was a stain that had appeared on her perfect night. Hera, she said, her tone thin, polite, deadly. What are you doing here? The crowd shifted uneasily. I heard someone whisper my name, another murmur, that's her? I felt every eye on me, peeling away my composure layer by layer. I managed a small, steady voice. I came to find out why no one showed up tonight. My brother chuckled softly, his confidence recovering quickly. We didn't know you'd planned something, he lied, and the ease in his tone made my stomach churn. My mother's lips pressed into a tight smile. You should have checked with us before assuming everyone was free, she said, like I was a child interrupting a grown-up party. Around us, the guests exchanged glances. I could feel the heat of humiliation crawling up my neck, but I refused to look away. I scanned the tables, gifts wrapped in gold paper, flower arrangements that probably cost more than my month's mortgage, and at the center, a framed portrait of my father. I took a shaky step forward. What is this? Ethan raised his glass again, eyes gleaming. A celebration, he said simply. Of the future. Of family. His arm draped around our mother's shoulders. The flash of cameras followed. Someone nearby laughed softly, pitying, maybe. My mother turned to me and hissed under her breath, "Don't make a scene, Hera." Not tonight. My throat ached. Not tonight? I whispered. You all knew. Her expression hardened. This isn't about you. Those 4 words broke something in me that had been holding for years. Every apology I'd ever made, every silence I'd ever swallowed, every act of forgiveness I'd given them for free, it all came crashing down right there, in front of people who smiled while watching me unravel. Then what is it about? I asked, voice trembling. Ethan clinked his glass against the podium and smiled like a performer reclaiming his spotlight. It's about legacy. The crowd cheered. My mother joined in. And as I stood there, drowning in applause that didn't belong to me, I caught sight of a man in a tailored suit stepping forward, carrying a briefcase. He shook Ethan's hand. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Good evening. I'm the family's attorney." The man's voice carried through the air like it owned the room. Smooth, rehearsed, precise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for joining us tonight to honor a new chapter for the Vaughn family." I felt my body go rigid. My brother's posture straightened as the lawyer continued, flipping open his briefcase. As many of you know, Mr. Vaughn's estate required careful restructuring following his passing. I am pleased to announce that the necessary transitions have been completed, with assets formally consolidated under a new directive. My breath caught. Estate. Directive. Words that didn't belong in a party. Words that belonged in courtrooms. Ethan beamed, one hand resting casually on our mother's shoulder. It's been a long time coming, he said to the crowd, his voice perfectly humble. But tonight marks a future my father would be proud of. My father. The man whose funeral my mother had turned into a fashion event. The man whose voice I hadn't heard in years before he died. My stomach churned as the lawyer lifted a sleek folder embossed with gold lettering and announced, "We are proud to present the official recognition of Mr. Ethan Vaughn as the active beneficiary and managing trustee of the Vaughn Estate Holdings." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. My world tilted. I forced my way forward, ignoring the stares. "Wait, what did you just say?" The lawyer looked up, polite confusion masking calculation. "I'm sorry, miss?" "Hera Vaughn," I said sharply. His daughter. His other child. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. My mother's nails dug into her champagne glass, her smile frozen. Ethan gave a light laugh, practiced. "It's just legal structure, Hera. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You used Dad's name to throw a party and cut me out at the same time." My mother leaned in close, her words sugar-coated and venomous. "You're embarrassing yourself. This isn't the place." I turned toward the lawyer. "My father didn't make that decision. He." The lawyer's tone softened, insincere. "All directives were signed and verified, Ms. Vaughn. You're welcome to review them, through formal channels." Formal channels. Meaning, don't bother fighting. Ethan raised his glass one more time. "To family," he said, smiling at me like he'd just buried me alive. And just as I turned to leave, I caught a glint from the folder the lawyer held, my father's signature. Except something about it was wrong. The slant. The pressure. It didn't look like his hand at all. The applause still echoed in my ears long after I left the house. It was the kind of sound that could haunt you, cold, triumphant, final. I stumbled into the night air, my body trembling from humiliation I couldn't contain. The lights from their celebration flickered across my windshield like ghosts mocking me. I sat behind the wheel, unable to move, the image of my brother's smug grin burning behind my eyes. They hadn't just excluded me, they had erased me. And done it with champagne glasses raised high. When I finally started the car, I didn't drive home right away. I drove aimlessly through the city, the road stretching ahead in blurred streaks of light. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My chest ached. Every word my mother had said, "This isn't about you. You're embarrassing yourself," echoed until it sounded like a chorus of judgment. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed again. My heart lurched, stupidly hopeful it might be an apology. But the sender was unfamiliar, Barrister Cole and Associates. The message read: "Notice of Preliminary Asset Inquiry, the Vaughn Estate Holdings. Ms. Hera Vaughn, please review the attached notice of involvement." I opened the attachment. My eyes darted over lines that blurred in and out of focus, legal jargon, dates, property numbers, references to estate-affiliated acquisitions. My dream home's address was listed. My pulse stopped for a moment, then raced. They were coming for the house. I sank into the couch, my knees weak, the phone trembling in my hand. The same family that had ignored me my entire life now wanted the one thing I'd built for myself. They couldn't stand that I'd owned something beautiful without their permission. I tried to call my mother. No answer. Tried my brother. Straight to voicemail. Tried again, blocked. The silence that followed was heavier than grief. It was strategy. Deliberate. Coordinated. I felt it now, the machinery behind their cruelty. This wasn't emotional punishment. It was legal. Targeted. The next morning, I woke to another email. Formal notice of estate dispute proceedings. I didn't even open it. I already knew what it said. But that afternoon, when the knock came at my door, firm, official, echoing through the house I'd built, I realized they weren't waiting for me to respond. They were already moving against me. The knock rattled through the front hall, sharp and deliberate. I froze halfway down the stairs, heart pounding like I'd been caught stealing something that was already mine. Through the window, I saw a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard and a thick envelope. He looked indifferent, efficient, the kind of man who didn't deliver news, only consequences. "Ms. Haravan?" he asked when I opened the door. My voice barely worked. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." The words carried no sympathy. Just procedure. He turned and walked away before I could even ask what it was for. The echo of his footsteps on the pavement lingered after the door shut. I tore the envelope open with shaking hands. The paper smelled sterile, expensive. The header confirmed my worst fear: notice of motion, estate affiliation and asset dispute. The letter claimed my property. The home I'd poured every piece of myself into was potentially misappropriated from Vaughn family holdings. It demanded I comply with disclosure and cease property-related transactions pending verification. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the truth stayed brutal and clean. They were trying to take my house. The walls around me, once soft and golden in the morning light, now looked predatory, like they'd been built from their money, their power, their permission. I felt cornered in my own space, like a trespasser. I called my mother. Straight to voicemail. Then again. Nothing. I texted my brother, "What is this?" He replied 3 words, "Handle it legally." I dropped the phone. My vision blurred, my breath quickened. I sat on the floor surrounded by half-opened boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, and for a moment, I felt the same way I had as a child, scolded, silenced, unwanted. I whispered to no one, "Why can't you just let me live?" Hours passed in a haze. By nightfall, I'd stopped crying. Numbness settled in like frost. I paced the house, touching walls that no longer felt safe. Every flicker of shadow felt like intrusion, every creak like betrayal. And then, another sound. The metallic click of mail sliding through the slot. Another envelope, this one stamped in red, court correspondence, mandatory appearance. My fingers went cold. They weren't just attacking my peace. They were summoning me. And deep inside the panic, a small voice whispered, "They wouldn't fight this hard unless you had something they wanted." I don't remember when I stopped standing. One minute I was staring at the court envelope, the next, I was on the floor, my back pressed against the cold wall, the paper scattered like broken glass around me. My breathing came in sharp, ugly bursts. The sound that escaped my throat didn't even feel human, it was something raw, animal, stripped of language. I wanted to call someone. Anyone. But who? My family had turned into a courtroom. My friends, what few I had left, only knew the version of me who said I'm fine and meant I'll survive. I picked up the first page, forcing myself to read through the blur of tears. Every sentence was a blade. Respondent, Ms. Haravan. Property title under review. Family interest claim pending verification. Legal poetry written to erase me. I pressed my forehead against my knees and tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. I thought of all the times I'd tried to earn their love, baking birthday cakes, paying bills when my brother's projects failed, covering for my mother when she didn't want to face the truth. All of it had been training. Training to take responsibility for pain that wasn't mine. And now they were taking the only thing I'd ever truly built alone. When the sobs finally stopped, the silence felt louder than my crying. My phone buzzed once, unknown number. I didn't answer. Buzzed again. Then a third time. Something inside me cracked open, I picked it up and croaked, "Hello?" A woman's voice, calm and professional, replied, Ms. Vaughn? My name is Marin. I work with the late Mr. Vaughn's legal affairs. My father. The name hit me like an electric jolt. She continued, I've been reviewing estate documentation, and there's something you should be aware of, something your father intended for you to receive years ago. I sat upright, every muscle in my body tense. What are you talking about? It's complicated, she said carefully. But from what I can see, your ownership of that property isn't accidental. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then why am I being sued for it? There was a pause. Then, quietly, she said, because someone doesn't want you to know what's attached to it. The line clicked. Call ended. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, pale, hollow-eyed, trembling, and realized for the first time in my life, I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was a threat. The next morning, my name was poison. I woke to messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, each one a dagger wrapped in civility. Why are you attacking your own mother? This is family business, Hera, not something to drag through court. You've always been so dramatic. My aunt sent a voice note, the tone syrupy and cruel. Sweetheart, I know you're hurting, but your father trusted Ethan. You should respect that. Be graceful. Graceful. The word that had always meant silent. By noon, gossip had metastasized. A coworker approached me at lunch, pretending concern. I heard, you're suing your family? She smiled too kindly, the way people do when they're starving for details. My appetite vanished. I excused myself, went to the restroom, locked the door, and leaned over the sink, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. I wasn't suing anyone. Not yet. They were dragging me into something I didn't even understand. But the world had already chosen a side. When I checked my phone again, there was one more message, my mother's voice. I hesitated before pressing play. Her tone was clipped, almost bored. You're embarrassing yourself, Hera. You've always had this need to feel wronged. If you don't back off, I'll make sure you lose more than your house. There was no love in her threat. Just precision. I replayed it twice, listening not to the words but the cadence, how steady she sounded. This wasn't a spontaneous act of cruelty. It was calculated. She was coached. Someone had taught her exactly how to corner me. I walked into my living room, every sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, my heartbeat in my ears. I was starting to see my family differently now. They weren't impulsive, they were methodical. And whoever was guiding them had power. I sat down, pulled out a notebook, and wrote one sentence. They want to make me look unstable. Then I underlined it. Twice. Because if they could make me the villain, they'd win before the trial even began. But something in me, something that had always been buried under obedience and apology, was stirring. I picked up my phone, replayed my mother's message once more, and saved it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix her voice. I was preserving evidence. 2 days later, I did what I swore I wouldn't, I asked for peace. I called my mother and requested a meeting, neutral ground, no lawyers, no accusations. She agreed instantly, too eagerly. Of course, darling, she said. Let's talk like family. We met at a cafe that smelled of roasted coffee and manipulation. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in navy silk, diamond earrings glinting like tiny victories. I'd spent hours rehearsing calmness in the mirror, but the moment she sat down, my throat tightened. Mom, I began softly, I just want to understand what's happening. I didn't start this. She smiled, cool, sympathetic, deadly. You're misunderstanding everything, Hera. You always do. I slid the notice across the table. This says you and Ethan filed a claim against me. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. Ethan handled the details. You know I'm not good with that kind of paperwork. That old tone, helpless, maternal, should have comforted me. Instead, it made my stomach twist. Then why did your name appear on the letterhead? She didn't answer. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into brown spirals. You always overreact, she murmured. You know how your father felt about trust. He didn't think you were ready for responsibility. My breath caught. That's not true. Her eyes met mine, flat, steady. It is. He told me himself. It was a lie. I knew it. I felt it. But she said it so easily that for a moment, I doubted myself. That was her gift, rewriting memory until even pain felt uncertain. Mom, I whispered, I just wanted you there. That night. At the housewarming. Her expression shifted, a flicker of something like guilt or amusement. You're still holding on to that? She laughed lightly. Hera, we were celebrating something important. You'd have ruined it. Tears stung my eyes. I just wanted to be included. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that sliced through me. That's the problem. You always want. I stared at her. The cafe noises blurred into static. She looked, relieved. Like breaking me was confirmation she still had control. When I finally stood to leave, she said softly, You can't win, sweetheart. Ethan has people behind him. I walked out, shaking. In my car, I screamed until my voice cracked, raw, wordless, feral. And when the sound died, my phone pinged. From Maren Caldwell, confidential, Hera Vaughn, directive and trust attachment. I opened the email right there in my car, engine still running, hands trembling so violently that my thumb almost missed the screen. The subject line was clinical, detached, directive and trust attachment, private. But the message beneath it, short, direct, made my heart stop. Ms. Vaughn. Your father instructed our office to deliver the enclosed documentation directly to you in the event of family conflict. The attached files detail trust terms and property associations under his name. M. Caldwell. The word trust jumped off the screen. I tapped the attachment. The document opened slowly, each line appearing like the unfolding of a truth I wasn't prepared for. There it was. My father's handwriting, digital scans, precise and unmistakable. I'd recognize that pen stroke anywhere. Next to it, the date, 3 months before he died. It wasn't a will. It was a contingency directive. The first paragraph outlined his intent to protect assets and rightful heirs from undue influence. The second listed items designated under separate holding entities, properties, accounts, investments, and one of them was mine. My house. I read it twice, then again, my breath coming shorter each time. My father had linked my home to a trust years before I ever bought it. Which meant I hadn't bought it by chance. It had been part of his plan. And then, halfway through the document, I saw the phrase that made my pulse spike. Silent beneficiary, subject, Hera Vaughn. My eyes blurred. Silent beneficiary. I didn't fully understand what it meant, but instinct told me it wasn't small. It was protection, disguised, deliberate. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a note written in my father's hand, scanned faintly but legible. If she ever needs proof, tell her I knew. And tell her not to trust the one who smiles first. My hands went cold. I looked up from my phone, out the windshield, into the reflection of my own eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharper than grief. It was clarity. They hadn't expected me to find this. They'd counted on my silence. My weakness. My fear. And they were about to learn what it feels like when the forgotten one starts remembering. My phone rang again, Maren's number. I answered with a whisper. Hera, she said, voice low, urgent, there's one more thing. Your father left a recorded statement. And your mother has spent years making sure you never hear it. Maren's office smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, like the air itself carried secrets. The walls were lined with files, boxes labeled with names, dates, case codes that sounded like quiet wars. I sat across from her, knees pressed together, trying to look calm while my entire reality rearranged itself. She slid a thick folder across the desk, her manicured fingers resting on the edge as if steadying its weight. "Everything in here is legitimate," she said softly. "Your father wasn't careless, Hera. He planned." The folder felt heavy when I touched it. Inside were copies of the same scanned pages I'd seen in the email, only now, they were accompanied by legal addendums, signatures, and financial records. The deeper I read, the more it felt like I was discovering another version of my father, one who'd known the cruelty waiting for me and built armor I didn't know existed. The first clause that made my heart stop was labeled, "Protective Trigger." Marin explained, "Your father designed this trust with a built-in activation condition. It only transfers administrative control to you if any party within the family initiates legal aggression." I blinked. "Legal aggression?" She nodded. "Any lawsuit, dispute filing, or attempt to claim assets against you. Essentially, the moment they came for you, the trust responded in your favor." My voice trembled. "So they activated it?" "Yes." Marin's eyes softened. "The moment they filed that motion against your property, control shifted to you. They handed you their own undoing." For a long moment, I just stared at the papers, unable to breathe. I thought about my mother's voice message, Ethan's smirk, the letter they'd served me like I was some intruder. They hadn't just underestimated me, they'd walked straight into a trap my father had set years before he died. But what haunted me most wasn't the legality, it was the intention. My father had known this would happen. There was a page titled Beneficiary Discretion. Under it, his handwriting, slanted, precise, outlined who he trusted to interpret his estate's clauses in my absence. I recognized none of the names. Except one. A man tied to a holding company. The same company that had sold me my house. I looked up sharply. "This company, Varon Holdings, why does that name appear in both documents?" Marin hesitated. "Because your house wasn't just a property purchase, Hera. It's listed as a trust-linked location." "Meaning," she exhaled, "your father left something tied to it. Something more than financial." The room seemed to tilt. "You mean he hid something there?" "I don't know what," Marin said carefully. "But there's an additional note in the sealed statement. It might explain everything." My pulse pounded. "And the recording?" She opened a drawer, pulling out a small, silver flash drive sealed in evidence tape. "It's here," she said. "He recorded it for you." I reached for it, but she held my gaze first. "Once you listen, Hera, you can't unhear it. Whatever your mother's been protecting, this will expose it." I took the drive in both hands, feeling its weight. "Then I want the truth." I drove home in silence, the flash drive sitting in the passenger seat like it could detonate if I looked at it too long. Streetlights painted my dashboard in flashes of gold and shadow, like my life was flickering between two versions, one that still believed in family, and one that finally didn't. By the time I parked, my hands were trembling too much to take the key from the ignition. The night outside was still, almost too still, like the world knew I was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Inside, the house felt different, charged, waiting. I locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, turned off every light except the one in my study. I plugged the drive into my laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a single file appeared, Von_record_8a.wave. I clicked play. The sound began with static, then a small, weary exhale. And then, his voice. My father. "Hello, Hera." I covered my mouth, tears spilling instantly. His voice wasn't strong like I remembered, it was older, slower, but steady. It sounded like a man who'd run out of time but not courage. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then it means what I feared has happened. You've been pulled into the storm I tried to keep you from. And I'm sorry for that." I leaned closer to the screen, every nerve in my body vibrating. "I need you to understand," he continued. "I didn't leave you out. I left you protected. I knew your mother would turn the family into a war. She is help, people who want the Vaughn legacy under their control. Ethan doesn't understand he's being used. But you," he paused, voice breaking slightly, "you're the only one I could trust to see through the mask." My tears came harder. I built the trust to outlive deceit. And I placed something in motion that only activates through conflict. When they come for you, you'll know what I mean. Maren has the documents. The house you bought, it isn't coincidence. It's a lockbox in disguise. Inside its records lies everything they've stolen and everything they fear. He drew a shaky breath. There's one more thing. Someone close to your mother, someone she calls a family friend, isn't just advising her. He's orchestrating this. He'll come for you once you know. Don't meet him alone. My pulse thudded painfully in my chest. Hera, he whispered, voice soft now, forgive me for the distance. I needed you invisible until it was safe to be seen. Remember, silence is power until you're ready to speak. The audio ended. The room felt hollow without him. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty waveform on the screen. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd hidden me, for war. And for the first time in my life, I understood why my mother was so afraid of me finding the truth. I replayed the recording 3 times, just to be sure I hadn't imagined it, his voice, his certainty, the soft warning threaded through every sentence. The sound filled my house until it felt alive, haunted by something protective instead of cruel. Each time I listened, another truth surfaced, sharper than before. I wasn't a mistake my family tolerated. I was a calculation they'd tried to bury. When I finally stopped the playback, I just sat there staring at the screen, my reflection ghosted over my father's frozen waveform. My hands still trembled, but my breathing had changed. It was slower now, controlled. My panic was cooling into precision. I scrolled through the trust documents again, this time reading not as a daughter, but as an opponent. Maren had highlighted the section labeled Activation Clause, Protective Custodianship. The language was complicated, dense with legal phrasing, but one sentence burned like a beacon. Upon verified familial aggression, custodial control transfers to subject Hera Vaughn, who assumes full discretionary authority over the Vaughn holdings under confidentiality. I whispered the words aloud. Custodial control. That meant authority. That meant me. My mother and Ethan hadn't realized that their lawsuit wasn't just cruel, it was the trigger. They'd pulled the pin themselves. My father hadn't designed a defense, he'd designed a trap, and I was standing in the center of it, alive. I pulled up the file Maren had sent labeled Beneficiary Discretion. A web of entities appeared, shell companies, property names, accounts under aliases. Each one tied back to something familiar. The company that sold me my house, the one Ethan's name appeared beside, and one more that made my skin prickle. A firm link to a consultant my mother mentioned over the years. A man she'd always described as family. The same man my father had warned me about. I leaned back, letting the realization sink in. My entire life had been a stage, my mother smiling for cameras, Ethan pretending to lead, while someone else pulled the strings in shadows. And I'd been the one variable they never planned for, the silent heir who knew too much now. My house, the dream I thought I'd built alone, wasn't random. It was evidence. A puzzle box my father had left, disguised as stability. For a long moment, I just sat there, letting it all breathe. The pain, the fury, the understanding. Then I wiped my tears and whispered, they think I'm still begging. I opened a blank folder on my computer and began saving every document, every voice file, every trace of proof. This wasn't grief anymore. This was groundwork. They thought they'd written me out of the story. They hadn't realized I was about to pick up the pen. The next morning, I met Maren again. Her office was colder this time, her assistant's eyes avoiding mine as if she knew I was standing on the edge of something seismic. Maren motioned for me to sit, a thin folder already waiting on her desk. I stayed up all night reviewing the records your father left, she said quietly. He was meticulous, every move designed years in advance. But Hera, there's something you need to see. She turned the folder toward me. Inside were copies of signatures, dozens of them, spanning nearly a decade. My father's name flowed elegantly across each page, but as I looked closer, the differences screamed. Some loops thicker. Pressure uneven. Dates overlapping with hospital records from when he couldn't have signed anything at all. These aren't all his, I whispered. Marin nodded. Some are forged. We verified it. But what's more important is who had access to his authorization stamps. Your mother did. And one other person, his appointed advisor. The name hit me like a physical blow. Leon Varon. The same name tied to the holding company that sold me my home. My hands clenched the edges of the folder. He was in on it. Marin's gaze held mine. Yes. Darren handled estate documentation and oversaw the trust until your father's death. But shortly after, your mother petitioned to continue his advisory role. She said your father trusted him like family. I laughed, hollow. She's been using him as her shield ever since. Marin leaned back, her tone sharpening. That shield is now your opponent. Darren's firm is funding your brother's legal representation. The room went still. I stared at the paper trail connecting them all, the ink that had turned my family into predators. My father knew, I murmured. That's why he created the contingency clause. He must have suspected Varon and my mother were working together. Marin nodded. And he left instructions that require a formal meeting between all parties to release his final letter to you. It's the only way to open it legally. A slow chill crawled through me. With them in the same room? Yes. You, your mother, your brother, and Varon. My first instinct was to refuse. To protect myself. But then, as I looked down at my father's falsified signature, the proof that someone had rewritten his final years, I felt something darker than fear rise in me. I wanted them to see me read that letter. I wanted to watch their faces crack open. Set it up, I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. Marin hesitated. Are you sure? I'm done running from ghosts, I said. It's time to show them I'm the one haunting them. Outside her office, the city lights reflected in the glass, twin worlds overlapping. One where I was still the quiet daughter. And one where I was becoming the woman they should have never created. That night, silence became my armor. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I didn't explain myself to people who wouldn't have understood anyway. I cleaned my kitchen until the counters gleamed, rearranged books that didn't need rearranging, folded towels as if they'd done something wrong. Control, any kind of control, was the only way to stop myself from shaking. When I finally sat down, I opened my notebook again. On one page, I wrote every word my mother had ever used to shrink me: dramatic, ungrateful, too emotional, selfish. Then I drew a line through each of them. I wasn't erasing them, I was reclaiming them. I'd spent a lifetime being trained to respond, to defend, to explain, to apologize. Tonight, I did none of it. I just listened to the quiet. And for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like strategy. I opened the trust documents again, studying them until the legal jargon started to form patterns. I highlighted names, cross-referenced dates, created a timeline. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, the slow rewriting of my father's intentions, the subtle repositioning of signatures, the false board approvals my mother and Varon had orchestrated after his death. And threaded through every deception was one clear motive: control. They didn't just want wealth. They wanted narrative. To decide what my father's legacy meant, who inherited respect, and who got erased quietly so the world wouldn't question it. But their arrogance had blinded them. They assumed I'd fall apart publicly, that my collapse would justify their lies. They never imagined I'd turn quiet. That silence terrifies narcissists. It's the one language they can't interpret. By midnight, I had color-coded every connection, a spiderweb of deceit mapped across my living room wall. Red for forged documents. blue for trust-linked assets, black for every name involved. And right at the center, Leon Varon. He wasn't just advising my mother. He was managing her moves, feeding her the illusion of control while securing his own. The filings, the estate party, the transfer, everything led back to him. I sat back, staring at the web until my eyes ached. The truth was worse than betrayal, it was choreography. My whole life had been performed for someone else's benefit. And yet, beneath the fury, a strange calm spread through me. Because for the first time, I wasn't the confused daughter standing outside the celebration. I was the woman preparing the evidence that would dismantle their performance. I picked up my phone, scrolled to my mother's contact, and hovered over call. My thumb trembled but didn't press. Instead, I whispered to the reflection in my dark window, "You don't get my voice anymore. You'll get my silence." Then I turned off the light and let the darkness hold me, because this time it wasn't fear. It was preparation. By morning, my quiet resolve had hardened into something colder, purpose. I brewed coffee I barely tasted and opened the court notice again. At the bottom, stamped in bold, was the name of the firm representing my mother and brother, Varon and Hale LLP. The moment I saw it, I understood. Varon wasn't just a shadow behind the curtain. He was the stage itself. My father's trusted advisor had built a legal empire notorious for one thing, winning by annihilation. They didn't negotiate. They destroyed. And now, their target was me. I typed the firm's name into my laptop. Page after page appeared, press photos, charity galas, features in glossy magazines. Leon Varon's smile stared back at me from every image, sharp, effortless, deliberate. He had the look of a man who'd convinced the world he was integrity incarnate. One article called him the architect of legacy law. My stomach turned. That's what my father's will had become, a blueprint he'd rewritten in Varon's favor. I dialed Marin. She answered on the second ring. "I saw it," I said. "He's funding everything." There was a pause. "Yes," she replied, her tone measured. "We can't prove it yet, but the financial channels are there, offshore, indirect, buried under holding entities. He's moving through intermediaries. And Hera," she hesitated, "your mother's debts were cleared 6 months after your father's death. The source traces back to one of Varon's accounts." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "He bought her. Or she sold herself," Marin said. "Either way, she's his asset now." I stared out the window, the world outside too bright, too normal. I imagined my mother sitting in that perfect kitchen of hers, rehearsing pity while Varon whispered instructions in her ear. I could almost hear him, "You're the rightful matriarch. You're just protecting what's yours." "Marin," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "how do I beat someone like him?" She didn't hesitate. "You don't fight on his field. You build your own." That night, I stayed up cataloging every interaction, every message, every voice memo I had. I replayed the cafe conversation with my mother, zooming in on her phrasing, "Ethan has people behind him." She wasn't lying. She just didn't say who. Then, buried in one of the emails she'd sent weeks ago, one line made my blood run cold. "Leon said we should finalize before she figures out the clause." She had written his name. Directly. It wasn't just circumstantial proof. It was a weapon. I saved the email twice, uploaded it to 3 separate cloud drives, and printed a hard copy I sealed in an envelope marked insurance. For the first time since the housewarming night, I smiled. Not out of joy, but realization. Leon Varon thought he was the predator. He hadn't met me awake yet. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. My mother's name lit up the screen like a siren. For a moment, instinct took over, I almost declined. But then I remembered Marin's warning, "Record everything." I slid my thumb across the screen, hit speaker, and pressed record. "Hera," my mother began sweetly, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should end all this unpleasantness. We're family, after all." I kept my voice calm. I agree. She exhaled in relief, fake relief. Good. There's no need to make things uglier. If you just sign a few papers, Ethan, and I can make sure you're comfortable. We'll take care of everything. There it was. The bait. What papers? I asked. Oh, nothing serious, she said lightly. Just something Leon suggested, so we can protect you. You've always been so emotional about these things. My hand tightened around the phone. I almost laughed at the word protect. Instead, I murmured, that's thoughtful of you. Can you send it to me first? A pause. I'd rather you come by, she replied quickly. We can go over it together. Privately. She didn't want a traceable record. But she didn't know I already had one. I let the silence stretch, then said, Mom, are you sure this isn't about the trust? Her tone sharpened. Don't use words you don't understand. This is about keeping peace in the family. I didn't respond. I just listened. People like her fill silence with confession. And she did. You know Ethan deserves this more than you, she said softly, the sweetness gone. He's worked for it. You've always been unstable. My thumb froze over the record button, but I didn't interrupt. You'll sign, she continued, because you can't handle the chaos this will bring. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. I closed my eyes and whispered, you mean protect yourself from me? A cold laugh slid through the speaker. Oh, Hera. You've always been so dramatic. Click. She hung up. I sat in the quiet for a moment, listening to the faint echo of her laughter through the recording. I replayed it once, twice, then sent it to Marin. Her response came minutes later. Marin, that's coercion. Don't confront her yet. Let her talk again. Get more. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A small, controlled smile that felt nothing like the ones I used to wear. I deleted every text thread except hers, turned off my notifications, and whispered into the stillness of the house, round one. Because now, I wasn't reacting to their game. I was starting mine. After that call, I became a ghost in my own story, present, but unseen. Every interaction, every text, every voice message became data. I wasn't a daughter anymore, I was an archivist, collecting proof of cruelty. I bought an external drive and labeled it Echo. It sat on my desk, disguised beneath a pile of invoices, humming like a secret heartbeat. Every night, I uploaded recordings, screenshots, timestamps, every word my mother or brother said that could slice through their false innocence later. By day, I played the role they expected, emotional, naive, unstable. I texted my mother apologies I didn't mean. I let Ethan talk down to me in his smug, professional tone, pretending his arrogance still had power. Each message he sent, each thinly veiled threat, was another piece of evidence stitched into my quiet tapestry. Marin's legal consultant coached me in calm tones. Let them believe you're folding, he said. Panic makes people sloppy. So I folded. Or at least, I looked like I did. Days turned into a pattern of manipulation. My mother sent voice notes full of false affection, using love like a leash. We just want to move forward, Hera, she'd say. You're blowing this out of proportion. Each time, I smiled to myself before saving the file. Her lies were painting the confession for me. At night, I studied. I learned the language of law, the meaning behind every clause, every loophole. Words that once terrified me became tools. I highlighted key terms until I could read contracts like emotions, seeing where deceit bled through polite phrasing. That's when I noticed something hidden in my property file, a clause linking the sale to Varon Holdings, my father's former company, later absorbed by Leon's firm. It wasn't coincidence. It was a breadcrumb. I called Marin immediately. My house, I said. It's connected. Her voice was sharp. That's not an accident. That house was part of the estate transfer. It was meant to be protected under the trust's defensive clause. I swallowed. So my father put me here on purpose. Yes, she replied. You're sitting inside the safeguard they've been trying to dismantle. I looked around at my walls, at the photographs, at the windows. My house, the one they wanted to take, wasn't just property. It was evidence. A container built for truth. That night, I printed the original deed, highlighting my father's initials faintly marked near the margin, an old habit of his, a way of signing without signing. I stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling in my hand. Then I whispered to the room, they think they're hunting me. They don't know they're walking into a snare. And as I filed the document into Echo, I realized revenge didn't need fire. It only needed patience. The next move had to look desperate. Manipulators only smell blood when they believe they've drawn it. So, I wrote my mother a message that sounded like surrender. Mom, I can't take the fighting anymore. I don't want lawyers. Can we please talk? I'll do whatever it takes to make peace. I stared at the text before pressing send. My pulse fluttered, part fear, part anticipation. Within 5 minutes, the typing dots appeared, then her reply, fast, eager. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Ethan and I have been worried about you. Let's meet. Tomorrow. Somewhere calm. And just like that, the predators returned to the table. The next afternoon, we met at a high-end bistro my mother adored, her safe environment. Ethan arrived late, as usual, looking polished and detached, the golden sun basking in manufactured superiority. He kissed her cheek, barely glanced at me, and said, let's settle this quietly. It's embarrassing for all of us. I kept my expression soft. That's all I want. He smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Leon drew up a simple agreement. It'll fix everything. Leon, I repeated. So, he's still involved? Ethan shrugged. Of course. He's family. That word, family, felt like acid. But I bit my tongue and nodded. Can I see it? He slid a document folder across the table. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. I pretended to read nervously, scanning each paragraph, but my brain recorded every word like a camera. There it was again, the same legal poison, buried clauses that would transfer not just my house, but custodial control of the trust to Ethan and my mother. If I signed, I'd erase my own inheritance. I glanced up with practiced fragility. This looks complicated. My mother reached over, laying her manicured hand on mine. Sweetheart, it's simple. It just acknowledges that you weren't meant to handle this burden. You'll get a settlement. A clean break. A clean break. I smiled faintly. You always did like things neat. Good girl, she said, squeezing my hand. You're finally learning. My voice stayed steady. Can I take this home to read? Ethan exchanged a look with her, too confident to sense the trap. Of course. But just sign the initial page, it's only a receipt. He slid a pen toward me. I let my hand tremble, hovering over the page, acting unsure. Then, before touching the pen, I asked softly, why does it list my house as collateral? Ethan's smirk faltered. My mother's jaw tightened. It's standard language, he said too quickly. Of course, I murmured. Just checking. I smiled, folded the papers neatly, and slipped them into my bag. Then I looked at Ethan, meeting his eyes fully for the first time in months. You should have come to my housewarming, I said quietly. It would have saved you a lot of trouble. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I stood, fixing my coat, voice cool as glass. You'll find out soon. The next morning, Ethan texted me, Leon wants to meet. Just to clear things up. No greeting, no apology, no warning. Just a command disguised as courtesy. I agreed immediately. Maren didn't like it. You're walking into the lion's mouth, she said. Bring the recorder. Don't confront, observe. So I did. The meeting was held in a downtown cafe that looked too bright for the kind of darkness it was about to host. I arrived early, positioning my phone under my scarf, recording app running. The steady red dot blinked like a pulse. Ethan arrived first, smooth and self-satisfied as ever. "You look tired," he said, sliding into the booth. "Maybe it's time to stop all this." "Maybe," I said, forcing a calm smile. "I just want peace." Then he walked in. Leon Barron. He was taller than I expected, gray suit, silver tie, the kind of presence that made silence bend around him. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like someone who never had to raise his voice to destroy a person. "Hera," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about you." His voice was velvet stretched over steel. I didn't take his hand. "That's interesting. I haven't heard anything about you that wasn't whispered." He chuckled, sitting across from me like a man already sure of victory. "Misunderstandings happen in grief. Your family only wants what's fair." "Fair," I repeated. That's a flexible word coming from someone who hides in legal smoke. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Hera, don't start." I turned to Leon. "You're behind this. The filings, the party, the trust manipulation, it all traces back to your firm." He smiled faintly, not denying it. "You're smart. I like that. But you're out of your depth." The arrogance in his tone was almost clinical. He leaned forward, voice dropping just enough for my recorder to catch. "Sell the property back to the family. Walk away. You'll be compensated generously. It's what your father would have wanted." The way he said "your father" made my skin crawl. He said it like ownership, not respect. I kept my eyes on him. "Funny. You talk like you knew him better than I did." His smile tightened. "In some ways, I did." I didn't blink. "Then you know he didn't trust you." For a brief second, the mask cracked. His eyes hardened, flat and dangerous. Then he stood, smoothing his jacket. "You should think carefully before making enemies who don't lose." He nodded once to Ethan, then turned and walked out. My brother exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Why do you have to make everything harder?" I stood too, my voice low, certain. "Because I've stopped pretending I'm afraid of him." Ethan frowned. "Them?" I met his gaze, calm. "You'll find out who I meant soon enough." And I walked out before he could answer, recorder still blinking, every word captured, every threat now mine. By the next evening, I received another message from Ethan. "Mom says it's time to end this. Come tomorrow, Leon will have everything ready." No warmth. No hesitation. Just certainty. The kind born from arrogance and legal backing. Perfect. Marin and I spent the night strategizing. "You're not walking into a negotiation," she warned. "You're walking into a confession. Let them dig their own grave." I nodded. "Then I'll hand them the shovel." The meeting was scheduled at a private lounge inside a luxury hotel, Leon's choice, of course. Polished marble, gold accents, air so filtered it didn't feel real. I arrived in beige and gray, neutral colors, harmless tones. I wanted to look like surrender. Ethan and my mother were already there. Leon stood beside them, relaxed, the paperwork fanned out on the table like a magician showing off his final trick. "I'm glad you came," he said smoothly. "I'm glad you'll finally stop," I replied, sitting down. He smiled like I'd just confessed defeat. "Once you sign, everything will be settled. Your name will remain untouched, and your family can move forward in peace." Peace. The same word they'd weaponized against me my entire life. My mother reached over, placing her hand on mine, all performance. "We only want the best for you, sweetheart." I looked at her fingers, diamond ring glinting, and thought of the times those same hands had slapped, dismissed, waved me away. "Of course, Mom," I said softly. "You've always been so generous." Leon pushed the papers toward me, tapping the signature line. Initial here to show good faith. It doesn't bind you, it just acknowledges you've reviewed the terms. I tilted my head, playing the naive child again. Can I read it first? Of course, he said confidently, leaning back. I flipped through each page slowly, scanning every clause. Hidden beneath paragraphs of formality were poison lines, clauses that would void my rights as trustee, assign control to Ethan, and redirect trust revenues into a holding account under Varon Management LLC. A perfect heist disguised as legality. Looks simple enough, I murmured. Just one question. Leon's smile didn't waver. Of course. Why does this list my property as collateral under family obligations? His jaw tightened, only slightly. It's procedural. Administrative protection. Ethan jumped in. It's just paperwork, Hera. Stop overanalyzing. I looked up at him, feigning confusion. Oh. I'm sorry. I just didn't realize my name being erased counted as paperwork. My mother sighed dramatically. Hera, please. I smiled faintly. You're right. Let's not make this difficult. I reached for the pen, slowly, and then stopped midair. Actually, one more thing. Leon's voice cooled. What now? I looked him straight in the eye. Would you mind if I take a photo? Just so Marin can explain it to me later. Ethan frowned. You don't need your lawyer. But I was already raising my phone. The shutter clicked once. Leon's face didn't change, but his eyes did. Calculation froze into realization. I smiled politely. Perfect. Then I slipped the papers into my bag, stood, and said, I'll think about it. My mother's voice turned sharp. Hera. But I was already walking away, my pulse steady, my recorder catching every word that would destroy them later. I hadn't even reached the door when Ethan caught up to me. His hand clamped around my arm, not hard, but tight enough to remind me of the pecking order he thought still existed. I turned slowly, forcing calm into my voice. You're holding me. He let go, but didn't move back. His tone dropped low, venom hidden beneath a silky smile. Don't play games, Hera. You have no idea what you're walking into. I know exactly what I'm walking out of, I said. He glanced around, then leaned close enough for me to feel the whisper brush my ear. If you fight us, we'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. My stomach flipped. And what's that? He smirked. A problem. A liability. The crazy one, Dad pitted out of guilt. For a moment, my throat closed. Old reflexes kicked in, the ones trained by years of being silenced, by the ache of wanting his approval. But this time I didn't retreat. I stared right through him until the silence between us became unbearable. He shifted, defensive. This doesn't have to end badly. Just sign the papers and walk away. Like you walked away from Dad's hospital room? The words left me before I could stop them. His jaw tightened. He took a step closer, voice a whisper edged with panic. Be careful, Hera. People who cross Leon don't recover. There it was, the fear behind the arrogance. He wasn't warning me out of love. He was warning me out of terror. I tilted my head. That sounds like a threat. He smirked. It's advice. I forced a brittle smile. Then let me give you some. Recordings last longer than memories. He froze. For a split second, confusion flickered in his eyes. I turned, walking out before he could process what I meant. By the time I reached the street, my chest was burning, not from fear, but from adrenaline. My phone was still recording. Every whisper, every threat, every lie, they were mine now. Evidence. Power. I drove straight to Marin's office, heart pounding so hard it hurt. She met me at the door, expression already tense. Did you get something? She asked. I nodded and pressed play. The room filled with Ethan's voice. If you fight us, we'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. Maren listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When the clip ended, she exhaled slowly. That's coercion and defamation. He just implicated himself. And the mention of Leon? She glanced at me. That's gold. Then she slid a folder across the desk. It's time. The formal letter reading is scheduled. You'll be in the same room with your mother, your brother, and Leon. My pulse quickened. And what do I do? Maren's lips curved into something between caution and pride. Nothing. Let them believe you're still their weakest link. The moment they think you've cracked, we spring the trap. I nodded, gripping the folder. Then, I whispered, let's end the show. The meeting was held in a downtown legal suite, glass walls, gray carpet, air conditioning that hummed like disapproval. The kind of place built for power to posture. Maren walked beside me, calm and deliberate, carrying a slim briefcase that looked lighter than it was. I carried nothing. Just my silence. When we entered, the room was already staged. My mother sat perfectly composed, hands folded, her pearls catching the sterile light. Ethan lounged beside her, scrolling through his phone like this was a business lunch. Across from them, Leon stood near the window, gazing at the skyline as if he owned the city. He turned when we entered, that signature smile in place. Hera. Lovely to see you again. I trust you've come to your senses. I smiled faintly. Oh, I've been thinking nonstop. Maren placed her briefcase on the table and opened it with quiet precision. Let's begin. Leon gestured to a court reporter in the corner. Everything recorded, as requested. Perfect, Maren said. Transparency is always healthy. My mother gave me a tight smile. You didn't have to bring your lawyer, dear. This was supposed to be civil. I've learned civility and safety aren't the same thing, I replied. Leon cleared his throat, assuming command. We're here to finalize settlement terms. If Ms. Bond signs the transfer agreement today, all estate-related disputes will be dismissed. The family wishes to resolve this quietly. He slid a thick document toward me. It landed in front of me like a coffin. Maren didn't touch it. Before my client reviews anything, there's an outstanding matter, Mr. Vaughn's sealed letter. The trust terms require it to be opened in the presence of all parties before further agreements. Leon's jaw flexed. That's unnecessary. Maren's voice stayed even. It's mandatory. The court reporter looked up. Noted. Leon hesitated, then nodded curtly. Proceed. My mother's fingers trembled slightly as she produced the envelope, the official seal still intact. Your father left this nonsense years ago, she muttered. We've all moved on. Maren took it from her carefully, sliding it open with gloved hands. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. I watched my mother's composure flicker, the faint twitch of her jaw, the tightening around her eyes. Ethan leaned forward, curiosity and irritation battling on his face. Leon's expression was unreadable, but his grip on his pen tightened. Maren began to read aloud. To my family. If this letter is being opened, it means the conditions I feared have come to pass. Know that I foresaw manipulation within my estate, and that I have structured protections accordingly. The room fell silent. My mother's breath hitched. Maren continued. Any attempt to disinherit or intimidate Hera Vaughn shall trigger full asset review and legal exposure under the clause of family interference. Ethan's head jerked up. What? Maren's tone sharpened just slightly. There's more. Further, should deception or coercion occur under the guidance of any advisor, the executor authority passes not to my wife, not to my son, but to Hera Vaughn. The air changed. My mother's face drained of color. Leon's composure cracked, a flicker of real shock in his eyes. I didn't move. I just looked at my mother and whispered, "You heard him." The silence that followed was deafening. Maren's voice didn't shake as she continued reading, though the air itself seemed to quiver. My father's words sliced through the room, clean, measured, irreversible. If any member of this family has acted with deceit, I expect truth to surface. My silence in life was protection. My voice in death will be consequence. The court reporter's fingers trembled faintly over the keyboard. Every syllable became part of history. My mother leaned back in her chair, her face tightening into something between disbelief and panic. This is absurd. He wasn't well when he wrote that, she said quickly. He was confused, grieving. Hera manipulated him. Maren didn't look up from the page. There's more. I am aware of my wife's continued communication with Leon Varon and his firm. I've documented their involvement in matters beyond counsel. This letter serves as record of my concern. Leon's pen stopped moving. His gaze snapped toward Maren, then me, searching for weakness. I gave him none. My mother's voice rose, sharp and brittle. You can't read that here, it's defamation. Maren folded the letter slowly, deliberately, her eyes meeting hers. It's his signature, Mrs. Vaughn. His words. Your husband's. My mother looked at Ethan for backup, but he was staring down at the table, jaw tense, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched white. Maren slid the final page across the table, facing me. Read the last line, Hera. Out loud. I hesitated, throat dry, but then I did. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. To my daughter, if they ever try to erase you, let this letter remind them that the foundation they stand on is yours to shake. Silence fell again. Thick. Waited. Leon finally spoke, tone measured but trembling with restrained anger. This doesn't change the current structure. Letters don't supersede contracts. Maren's smile was razor thin. Unless the contracts were derived from forgery and coercion. Which, as of this morning, we can demonstrate. Ethan's head snapped up. What proof? Maren's hand slid to her briefcase. She opened it like she'd been waiting for that line. Inside lay printed transcripts, voice recordings, and copies of documents stamped with the Vaughn seal, but with signatures that didn't match. Leon's face hardened. You're overstepping, Ms. Caldwell. I'm following instruction, she said. From the legal executor. She turned to me. Hera Vaughn, your father appointed you as executor of the Vaughn Trust and Holdings. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. I let the words echo around the table until they became undeniable. Ethan looked like someone had punched him. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. Leon was the only one who recovered fast enough to speak. You don't understand what you're holding. Finally, I smiled, a small, calm smile that carried generations of silence breaking. Oh, I understand perfectly. I'm holding your leash. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked at me not as a disappointment, but as danger. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. The only sound was the soft, mechanical clicking of the court reporter's keys, each stroke a nail sealing their illusion of control inside a coffin. My mother's voice broke first. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Hera's twisting everything. She's not capable of any of this. Leon's hand lifted slightly, the gesture smooth but loaded with tension. Calm down, he murmured. But even his voice had lost its polish. Maren didn't look at either of them. She reached into her briefcase and placed a small recorder in the center of the table. We'd like this entered as supplementary evidence. A phone call between Ms. Vaughn and her mother, in which coercion was implied and inheritance manipulation confirmed. Leon's eyes flicked to mine, sharp, assessing. You recorded your own mother? I met his gaze evenly. I preserve history. Maren pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, soft, confident, familiar. You know Ethan deserves this more than you. You'll sign because you can't handle the chaos this will bring. Then my voice, calm, you mean protect yourself from me. And finally, my mother's laugh. Cold, cruel, unambiguous. The sound faded into silence. Ethan looked sick. My mother's composure fractured, her lips quivering as she whispered, "That's out of context." Maren leaned back. "The context is clear enough." Leon's mask cracked thin, barely, but I saw it. He knew the optics were shifting, that his client was bleeding credibility in front of witnesses. His voice lowered, a quiet snarl beneath civility. "You don't know the forces you're meddling with, Hera. You're too emotional to play at this level." "I'm not playing," I said softly. "I'm remembering." He leaned forward, voice sharpened like a blade. "You think you've won? This isn't the end. You're just a name on paper, an emotional liability attached to a fading empire." I tilted my head, letting the smallest smile touch my lips. "And yet, somehow, that name just outranked you." Leon inhaled sharply through his nose, his restraint cracking for the first time. Maren's eyes flicked toward him, cold and steady. "Mr. Varen, this meeting is being recorded. I suggest you watch your tone." He sat back, silent now. Then Maren opened another folder, thin, deliberate. "Before we close, I'd like to introduce corroborating proof of forgery." She spread out 2 signatures, one genuine, one falsified. "We've had both verified. The forged one appears on property transfer documents processed through your firm." Leon didn't answer. He couldn't. Ethan muttered something under his breath, anger, maybe disbelief. My mother's face was pale, her lips parted in shock that didn't look rehearsed anymore. I stood slowly, the movement pulling every eye in the room toward me. "I won't gloat," I said. "That's your language, not mine. I'll just let truth do what it does best, survive." Leon finally spoke, voice low and dangerous. "You think exposure scares me?" "No," I replied quietly, meeting his gaze head-on. "I think being seen does." And for the first time, Leon Varen didn't smile. The silence after that was the kind that could cut glass. Maren's expression didn't flicker, she just nodded toward the court reporter. "Read that last line back, please." The woman's voice shook as she repeated my father's words, "Executor authority passes not to my wife, not to my son, but to Hera Vaughn." It was like dropping a match in a room full of gas. My mother slammed her palm against the table, pearls rattling against the glass. "He was sick when he wrote that. You can't let this stand," he didn't know what he was saying. Maren's tone was polite but deadly. "Then why were the signatures forged after his death?" Ethan shot up from his chair, voice sharp. "You can't prove that." Maren didn't flinch. "I already have." She slid a stack of papers forward, page after page marked with inconsistencies, notarization errors, and timestamps that contradicted hospital records. These were submitted through Varen's firm. "I've filed for independent verification." Leon's voice snapped across the room. "You have no authority to access those files." Maren's smile was ice. "I do now. You just heard the reading." The tension in the room shifted. For the first time, they didn't look like a family, they looked like defendants. My mother's breath hitched, her eyes darting between me and Maren. This isn't real. She's manipulating you, just like she manipulated him." Maren folded her hands neatly. "You're free to continue your accusations, Mrs. Vaughn, but I'll remind you the court reporter is still present." The clicking of the keys continued, mechanical and relentless. My mother sank back into her chair, trembling hands gripping her purse like it might save her. Ethan's face was red now, rage and fear twisting together. "You've destroyed this family, Hera." I looked at him evenly. "You did that when you turned our father's legacy into a trophy." He pointed at me, his voice cracking. "You've always been jealous." That word, jealous, echoed like a ghost from childhood. The accusation they'd used every time I'd asked for fairness, every time I'd tried to exist. I laughed softly, the sound strange in my own ears. "You mistake survival for envy." My mother glared at Maren. "You think this little show changes anything? Leon will have this buried before it reaches court." Maren's eyes gleamed. "Actually, Mrs. Vaughn, you may want to hear what I brought instead." She lifted a small flash drive and placed it on the table. This contains an audio recording of your son and Mr. Varon attempting to coerce my client into signing away her rights. That, combined with forged signatures, qualifies as conspiracy and fraud. Leon went still. Ethan's voice broke. You recorded. I met his eyes. You told me people who cross Leon don't recover. I wanted to test that theory. The court reporter typed faster, recording every trembling syllable. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. You wouldn't. Marin's tone sliced through her fear. She already has. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt something inside me unclench. I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't pleading. And across the table, I watched the empire they'd built on deceit begin to fracture, crack spiderwebbing under their perfect faces, until even their silence sounded like panic. The room erupted. The moment Marin's words hit, the air turned electric, panic disguised as noise. Ethan's voice shot across the table, high and defensive. You manipulated those recordings. This is illegal. Marin didn't even blink. They were obtained lawfully, with consent from one of the recorded parties, my client. Leon's jaw tightened, his voice dangerously calm. You're making a grave mistake, Miss Caldwell. Not as grave as yours, she replied. I watched my mother's composure disintegrate in real time. Her fingers trembled on her glass of water. She didn't drink it. Her chest rose and fell too quickly, the rhythm off. She turned to Ethan, her voice sharp, brittle. Say something. But he couldn't. He was pale now, staring at the documents as if reading them might make them untrue. Marin leaned forward, steady as a blade. Mrs. Vaughn, before we continue, would you like to explain why your husband's advisor's name appears on unauthorized transfers made after his death? The question sliced the air clean in half. My mother blinked rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Marin asked, flipping to a page. Because the account routing numbers link to your private fund. You filed the authorization forms yourself. Ethan turned to her, confused. What is she talking about, Mom? My mother faltered, her eyes darting between us, then to Leon. His expression was pure warning. But she didn't see it. She was unraveling. I was protecting us, she blurted. Your father didn't know what he was doing anymore. He was giving things away, signing nonsense, someone had to manage it. Leon closed his eyes, too late. Marin's smile was almost pitying. Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn. For confirming unauthorized management of estate assets. My mother's mouth fell open. No, wait, that's not what I meant. Marin looked at the court reporter. Please read that statement back. The woman repeated it verbatim. Each word landed like a nail sealing a coffin. My mother froze, realizing the trap she'd walked into. You twisted that. I meant I was helping. Ethan stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You said Leon was handling it. You said it was legal. Sit down, Leon hissed under his breath. His tone had lost its gloss, the predator was showing through now. No. Ethan's voice cracked, desperate. You told us this would fix everything. Marin glanced at me, her voice soft, deliberate. Hera, would you like to make a statement for the record? I turned to my mother. Her mascara had started to bleed, tiny rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes, once sharp as glass, looked empty. No, I said quietly. The letter spoke for me. My mother's face twisted, rage flooding in where dignity had died. You think this makes you better than me? She spat. You'll regret this. You'll regret ever being born into this family. Marin pressed her hand to the table, calm as stormlight. Noted, she said to the court reporter. And that was it, the final line. My mother's confession wasn't a scream. It was the collapse of a throne. Ethan sank back down, silent, while Leon's composure finally fractured, his hand trembling as he adjusted his cufflinks, the mask cracking in the reflection of the glass walls. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. Just as Marin began gathering the papers, the door opened behind us with the quiet authority of someone who didn't knock because he didn't need to. The air shifted instantly. Leon turned before anyone else. His posture straightened, his expression rearranged itself back into the careful, professional mask. But his eyes, those calm, confident eyes, flickered. The man who entered wasn't a lawyer. He was dressed too sharply for that, too relaxed. His suit whispered wealth, his shoes, power. He carried no briefcase, no documents, only certainty. "Ah," Leon said tightly, "you're early." The man smiled. "I don't believe in being late to my own cleanup." Marin's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" He offered his hand to no one. "Richard Kellen," he said smoothly. "Senior partner. Silent investor. And, I suppose, the ghost in all your paperwork." The name hit me like a blow. My father had mentioned it once, years ago, a boardroom acquaintance who vanished after a financial scandal. The kind of man who stayed powerful by never getting caught. He looked directly at me. "So. You're the daughter. The storm in the Von dynasty." I didn't answer. He chuckled softly. "You look like your father when you're angry." He never understood leverage either. Marin stood. "Mr. Kellen, this is a private legal meeting. You have no standing here." "On the contrary," he said, glancing at Leon. "Every transaction that passed through Varon and Hale in relation to the Von estate came from my capital. So technically, I'm the one footing the bill for this entire melodrama." My mother whispered, "Richard, please," in a voice that was too familiar. Too intimate. The room felt colder. He turned to her, his tone mocking. "Don't beg now, darling. You already spent my money." My stomach twisted. My father's suspicions, his letter, everything lined up. Leon wasn't the puppet master. This man was. "You orchestrated this," I said quietly. "You used them to dismantle my father's trust." He smiled like a cat admiring a cornered bird. "Your father's trust was outdated. He built walls when he should have built doors. I'm just walking through one." Marin's tone sharpened. "You're confessing to interference in a legal estate." He shrugged. "You call it interference. I call it restructuring." Ethan finally found his voice, fear-laced and trembling. "You said this would protect us." Kellen's gaze cut to him, disgusted. "No, Ethan. I said it would protect me." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "You can't, Richard, please, they'll destroy us." He laughed quietly, stepping closer to her. "You destroyed yourself when you forged a dead man's signature." That was when Marin moved, swift, precise. "Mr. Kellen," she said, "everything you've said since you entered this room has been recorded." His smile faltered. "Just slightly." "Good," he said finally. "Then history will know who won." I rose from my chair, my voice steady. "Oh, it will." Because I realized something in that moment, he hadn't come to intimidate me. He'd come to measure me. And from the look in his eyes as I stared him down, he'd finally realized his mistake. He'd come to silence me. But I was already too loud to erase. Kellen's confidence was the kind that could fill a room, but now it was cracking like porcelain. Marin didn't blink, she leaned back in her chair, voice even, lethal. "Mr. Kellen, you just implicated yourself in active financial interference and coercion under a court-recorded meeting." He smiled, but his jaw flexed once, betraying tension. "You're bluffing." Marin opened her folder and slid a printed transcript forward. "This is the part where you assume I don't prepare." He hesitated before looking down. The top line read, "Preliminary audit request, Von Holdings. Dated yesterday. Signed by an independent investigator." Leon's composure wavered next. "You went over my head," he hissed. Maren didn't answer. She didn't need to. Kellen's silence thickened into fury. He looked to my mother, but she was shaking, too frightened now to hide behind poise. "Tell me you didn't say anything else," he snapped. Her lips moved soundlessly. I was trying to fix it." "Fix it?" he repeated, eyes narrowing. "You confessed to a felony." Ethan stepped in front of her, his protective instinct flickering like a dying flame. "You don't talk to her that way." Kellen rounded on him. "You're done talking. Both of you." The temperature in the room dropped. His voice wasn't loud, it was low, controlled, and horrifyingly calm. "Do you think your father built this empire alone? Do you think his brilliance kept you rich? It was me. My money. My reach. And all I asked was obedience." I stood. Slowly. "You mean silence?" He turned, assessing me again. His smirk returned, but the sweat beating at his temple betrayed the calm he was fighting to keep. "You have no idea how deep this goes, Hera. You're an inconvenience, not an equal. You inherited sentimentality, not strategy." I took a step forward. "And you inherited arrogance, not immunity." The court reporter's typing grew louder, her fingers almost frantic. Every word he said, every threat, was being immortalized. Maren rose beside me. "That's enough. We'll be filing this conversation, along with your earlier admissions, to the court within the hour." Kellen's eyes flashed. "You won't make it that far." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only I could hear. "Walk away, Hera. You don't want me as your enemy." My pulse didn't waver. "You already are." For the first time I watched him falter, his certainty breaking for half a heartbeat. He turned toward Leon, voice sharp, almost panicked. "Handle this." But Leon didn't move. He just stared at the floor, his power bleeding out of him like color from a dying flame. Kellen straightened his cuffs, trying to recover his composure, but the illusion was gone. His voice was still smooth, but the sweat along his brow gleamed under the lights. "You're making a mistake," he said. I smiled faintly. That's what my mother said before she lost everything. And for the first time since this began, I saw it. Fear, pure and human, hiding behind his perfect face. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Maren gathered the evidence calmly while Leon tried to whisper damage control into Kellen's ear. My mother sat motionless, her pearls askew, her lipstick smeared. Ethan hovered near her like a child who'd finally realized the adults were monsters. As I turned to leave, her voice, thin, trembling, stopped me. "Hera, please. Just, wait." Maren gave me a warning glance, but I nodded. 5 minutes, I said. My mother followed me into the hallway, heels clacking too fast, desperation heavy in every breath. When the door closed behind us, she grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "You're going to destroy the family," she hissed. I pulled my hand free, my voice low. "No, Mother. You already did that. I'm just documenting it." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. For once, I didn't fill the silence for her. It stretched until she broke it. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, voice cracking. "This man, Kellen, he's dangerous. You're a child playing with wolves." "I was raised by them," I said. Her eyes darted away, tears gathering. "I did everything for you, Hera. Everything. You think I wanted this?" "Wanted what? To sell Dad's trust to a stranger? To erase me from your perfect narrative?" "I did it to protect you," she cried. "You were never strong enough for this world. You." I stepped closer. "Stop pretending this was love. You didn't protect me. You prepared me, to be quiet, to be small, to disappear when you were embarrassed by me." The guilt flickered behind her eyes, gone in an instant. The begging stopped. The venom returned. Her face twisted. "You think this victory will last?" You think these people care about you? Once the headlines fade, you'll still be nothing. No family, no name, no one to love you. I smiled faintly. You said that when I moved out. And yet, here I am, still standing, still unbought. Her hand trembled. You've ruined us, she whispered. No, Mother. You ruined yourself the day you chose loyalty to a thief over truth. For a heartbeat, I saw something flicker in her expression, panic, shame, maybe even regret. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She straightened her blouse, smoothing her hair back into place. You don't even know what your father really did, she said quietly, voice dripping with poisonous calm. You think you're the victim in this? He left more secrets buried than you can handle. My chest tightened. What secrets? Her lips curled into a cruel smile. Ask your lawyer. Or better yet, check under your pretty little house. He left more there than just guilt. The hallway fell silent, the echo of her words wrapping around me like a threat wrapped in truth. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks in a story she thought she still controlled. But her last line, that one sentence about my father's secrets, had just opened a door I didn't know existed. I stood there long after my mother's heels stopped echoing down the corridor. Her words sank in slow, like poison seeping through skin, check under your pretty little house. It wasn't an insult. It was a map. But before I could follow that thought, another door opened behind me. Ethan stepped out, looking different now, less smug, more hollow. His tie hung loose, his hair mussed like he'd been pulling at it. Hera, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was near. We need to talk. I didn't move. Talk, or spin? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You think I wanted this? You think I knew everything Leon and Mom were doing? I laughed under my breath. You always knew enough to benefit. He winced, but didn't argue. She told me Dad cut you out. That you were unstable, and that keeping the estate with me was what he wanted. I believed her. You didn't just believe her, I said softly. You helped her. He hesitated. Maybe. But you don't know the full story. There's more. Kellen isn't just helping us. He owns everything now. The company, the houses, even the trust's offshore accounts. He's been consolidating for years. So why are you telling me this now? His expression flickered, guilt and fear fighting for dominance. Because he's done with us too. You were right, Mom sold us. He's planning to dissolve everything once this blows over. That letter, you humiliated him in there. He's not going to stop. Is that supposed to scare me? I asked. It's supposed to warn you, he said, stepping closer. You think he'll let you keep that house? You think he won't come after you personally? He doesn't lose, Hera. And he doesn't forget. I tilted my head. Then why warn me? He looked down, voice almost breaking. Because I didn't think it would go this far. Because Mom's losing it, and Kellen doesn't care if she burns with him. Because, his voice faltered, you were right about Dad. He wasn't confused. He knew what was happening. A bitter laugh escaped me. And you're realizing that now? His shoulders sagged. I thought I was protecting the family. I didn't see that I was helping kill it. Ethan, I said quietly, you didn't kill the family. You just handed it to the wrong executioner. He looked up, eyes glassy. What are you going to do? I smiled faintly. What Dad trained me to. He frowned. And what's that? Wait, I said. And watch them unravel. He swallowed, then lowered his voice again. Be careful, Hera. You don't understand how deep Kellen's reach goes. I stepped closer, so close I could see the fear flicker behind his eyes. Then maybe he should start being afraid of how deep mine does. Ethan blinked, speechless. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't see the little sister he could manipulate. He saw the woman his father had prepared to finish what he started. The next 48 hours blurred into motion: emails, calls, filings, signatures. Marin moved like a machine, calm and exacting, while I felt half awake, half electric. Every document I'd hoarded for months, the recordings, the signatures, the transcripts, became pieces of a weapon we were finally loading. By dawn on Monday, she called me into her office. Papers covered every inch of the conference table. "It's ready," she said simply. "What is?" "The injunction. We're freezing every account tied to Vaughn Holdings, every property under Kellen's shelf firms, and every transaction under your mother's name. Temporary now, but once the court sees the evidence," she looked up at me. "It'll become permanent." My mouth went dry. "That's everything? Even their personal accounts?" She nodded once. "Including the one she uses for her jewelry purchases." A small, bitter laugh slipped out. Poetic. The filings went out electronically that morning. By noon, confirmations began rolling in, first from the bank, then from the corporate registry. Account access restricted. Asset mobility suspended. It was a simple string of words, but each one felt like the closing of a door they'd tried to keep open for years. That evening, the silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts. Then at 9:14 p.m., my phone buzzed 37 times in a row. All from my mother. I didn't answer a single one. By 10 p.m., Ethan sent a message instead: "What did you do? Mom's cards are frozen. She's losing her mind." I typed back only 2 words: "Found leverage." An hour later, Marin called. "Security first," she said. "They'll panic. People like Kellen always do when power shifts." I wanted to believe she was exaggerating. But when I drove home, headlights trailing across my driveway, I saw it, the faintest sign of intrusion. My front door was ajar. I stopped the car at the curb and killed the engine. My heart pounded against my ribs. I grabbed my phone and called Marin before I even stepped out. "Someone's been inside." "Stay in the car," she said instantly. "I'm calling the police." But I couldn't just sit there. I stepped out slowly, every sense sharpened. The wind was still. My porch light flickered once, like it was warning me. Inside, the air smelled wrong, too clean, like someone had wiped it. The drawers in my study were half open, papers scattered. Nothing of value was missing, but I saw immediately what was. A single folder, the one labeled Echo 2, gone. The officer who arrived 20 minutes later asked routine questions, but I could see it in his face, he didn't believe it was random. "Looks like someone was searching, not stealing," he said. "Exactly." Marin's voice over the phone was steady. "They're scared," she said. "And that's good. Fear makes them careless. Now, Hera, we make it public." I looked around my violated house, at the shattered illusion of safety, and whispered, "Then let's end their hiding." When the police finally left, their blue lights fading down the street, my house fell silent again, but not peacefully. Every sound became an accusation. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the hallway floorboards, even the faint ticking of the kitchen clock felt foreign, invasive. Someone had been here, breathing my air, touching the walls that once meant safety. I stood in the living room, staring at the table where the police had left their notepad. No sign of forced entry. Those words echoed like mockery. Whoever did this didn't break in, they belonged here, or at least knew how to pretend they did. I checked every room, one by one. My bedroom was untouched, the bed still neatly made. The study was worse, files rifled through, drawers open just enough to prove they'd been handled. My laptop sat crooked on the desk, its screen faintly glowing. A single window, the one facing the garden, had been unlatched. I sat at my desk, shaking but trying to stay rational. I reopened my files, Echo, the evidence archive. Nothing looked deleted, but the second drive, Echo 2, was gone. It wasn't the main copy, but it contained duplicates of key recordings. the loss wasn't fatal. It was psychological. A message. They wanted me to know they could reach inside my sanctuary. My phone buzzed. Marin again. The officer filed his report, she said. No forced entry means inside knowledge. Hera, change your locks. All of them. I will, I whispered, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. They took one of the drives. Her silence was heavy. It's intimidation. Don't give them what they want. Let's use it instead. How? Through exposure, she said simply. We go public. You've been careful, strategic. Now we make the truth visible, on record, on paper, and in front of witnesses. They can't erase you if the world is watching. I glanced toward the window. Outside, my garden lights flickered, faint and unreliable. They won't stop, I said. They're too desperate now. Good, Marin said. Desperation breeds mistakes. After she hung up, I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The glass clinked against the counter. I took a slow breath and forced myself to move room to room again, documenting everything with my phone camera. Every disturbed drawer, every misplaced file, every fingerprint smudge. If they wanted me afraid, they'd get evidence instead. By midnight, I emailed everything to Marin, then to myself, 2 accounts, encrypted. Backup on backup. I wouldn't be erased again. When I finally sat down, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I looked around my house, the dream I once bought to prove I belonged. Now it was a battleground, and I was its last defender. On my front door, the police had taped a temporary notice, under investigation. I almost laughed. Once, this was supposed to be a housewarming. Now, it was proof. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt alive in the worst way, like it was holding its breath with me. Every shadow looked deliberate. Every creak sounded like a warning. I sat on the floor of my study, surrounded by printouts, legal pads, and memories that suddenly made sense. By dawn, I had a plan. When Marin called, her tone was calm, measured. We go public. We bring them all to a single table, your mother, your brother, Kellen. Under the guise of a settlement review. But this time, there'll be witnesses, media monitors, and a legal observer. If they lie, it's recorded. If they threaten, it's evidence. I listened, steady. You want me to bait them? No, she said. You're not bait. You're the storm they walked into. I agreed without hesitation. Over the next 3 days, everything moved like clockwork. We staged the meeting at a neutral venue, a government mediation room with glass walls and security cameras. Marin coordinated with an auditor and an independent investigator, both officially sanctioned. Everything legal. Everything public. In the meantime, I rebuilt Echo 2 from scratch, every file re-uploaded, every timestamp re-verified. This time, I added one more recording, the whisper Ethan had thought no one heard. If you fight us, we'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. The day of the meeting, I dressed simply, black trousers, crisp white shirt, hair tied back. I wanted no softness left, no trace of the daughter they'd once dismissed. My reflection looked unfamiliar, controlled, unreadable. When I arrived, the others were already there. My mother, draped in navy like she was still the matriarch of some crumbling empire. Ethan, tense, defensive, eyes darting. And Leon Varon, standing behind them with that professional chill that had begun to crack. But beside him, Kellen. Smiling. Confident. Unaware that this was his stage, not his sanctuary. Marin and I entered quietly. The observers greeted us, cameras already rolling. No one could rewrite this moment. My mother started first, rehearsed and sharp. I think we've all suffered enough. Let's be adults and find a solution. Marin didn't reply. She simply opened her case, clicked a pen, and began distributing documents. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded for transparency. Kellen smirked. Transparency is a luxury, Ms. Caldwell. Let's not confuse it with relevance. On the contrary, Marin said smoothly. Relevance is what's about to destroy you. The auditor looked confused for only a moment, until Marin motioned toward the door. Two people entered, carrying folders stamped with official seals. Who the hell are they? Ethan asked. Marin's voice was calm. The independent investigator assigned to Vaughn Holdings. And the financial crimes officer handling the trust inquiry. The silence that followed was absolute. Kellen's smile didn't falter, but his hand twitched once, betraying him. And my mother's eyes widened as she finally understood, she wasn't at a settlement. She was at her own exposure. The hearing chamber felt colder than any courtroom I'd ever imagined. The walls absorbed sound, amplifying the smallest noise, the shuffle of papers, the hum of a recorder, the shallow breaths of people waiting for their empire to implode. Marin stood beside me, unflinching. Across the table sat the ghosts who once called themselves my family. My mother's posture was rigid, her pearls dull under the harsh fluorescent light. Ethan looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, like a man realizing the ground beneath him was made of lies. And Kellen, he still smiled, but his hand never left his tie, adjusting it every few seconds as if that ritual could restore control. When the judge entered, no one breathed. The findings were short, surgical, brutal. The trust had been tampered with. Transfers unauthorized. Signatures falsified. The protective clause, validated. The authority, mine. Each conclusion landed like thunder. My mother's face crumpled, the polished dignity melting into disbelief. Ethan slumped forward, whispering something to her that sounded like prayer or blame, I couldn't tell which. Leon Varon avoided everyone's eyes, his silence louder than guilt. Kellen didn't flinch outwardly, but I saw it, the twitch in his jaw, the stillness of a predator realizing the trap had already closed. The judge's final line was quiet but absolute. Executor authority and majority ownership transfer to Ms. Hera Vaughn, effective immediately. I exhaled. For the first time in months, my lungs remembered what air was supposed to feel like. Beside me, Marin whispered, "It's over." But she was wrong. I looked across at my mother, her trembling hands, her eyes burning with something that wasn't regret but hatred, and I knew. It wasn't over. It was just public. The courthouse emptied slowly, the echo of footsteps blending with the murmur of reporters outside. Marin stayed close, scanning faces, making sure no one tried to twist this victory into another ambush. But I saw her glance soften once, because she knew. This wasn't triumph. It was aftermath. My mother found me before I reached the doors. She looked smaller now, like the collapse had aged her overnight. Her lipstick was smudged, her perfume faint, a ghost of the woman who once commanded rooms through posture alone. "Hera," she said softly. It was the first time she'd said my name without venom. I stopped but didn't turn fully toward her. "Don't," I said. She stepped closer anyway, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared. Your father, he left so much undone. I was trying to protect what was left of us." I faced her then, slowly. "You forged his name, Mom." Tears welled in her eyes, but even now, there was calculation behind them. She wasn't crying from guilt. She was crying for survival. "You don't understand how much pressure there was. How much Leon and Richard." "Stop," I said sharply. "You chose them. You didn't have to." She swallowed hard, searching for an angle that didn't exist. "You can end this, Hera. We don't have to be enemies." I almost laughed. "We were never anything else." Her hand trembled as she reached toward me. "Please. I'm still your mother." I stepped back. "That's the problem." Behind her, Ethan hovered silently, his expression unreadable. His loyalty had no home left. I turned to leave, but she called out one last time, voice cracking, desperate. "You'll regret this." I paused, looked over my shoulder, and said quietly, "No, Mom. You will." Then I walked out into the flash of cameras and sunlight that finally didn't burn. The courthouse steps gleamed beneath the late afternoon sun, marble blinding against the sea of cameras and murmured questions. The press smelled blood, but I wasn't their tragedy anymore, I was the aftermath. I moved through them like smoke, silent, untouchable. Marin flanked me, her tone clipped, professional. "No comments," she said firmly. "All statements will be released in writing." Behind me, through the glass doors, I could still hear my mother shouting. Her voice cracked, rage stripped of dignity. Ethan tried to calm her, but he couldn't even hold her anymore. Leon stood apart, already on his phone, his empire dissolving through the lines of a signal he couldn't control. And Kellen, he didn't speak at all. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, like a man finally seeing the limits of his influence. Every step I took away from them felt like shedding skin. The courthouse air gave way to the scent of the city, exhaust, coffee, rain-soaked pavement. I hadn't noticed before how alive the world smelled when it wasn't filtered through someone else's lies. When I reached my car, I stopped and turned, looking back one last time. Not to gloat, just to confirm they were real. Broken, exposed, human. For years, I thought power meant noise, who shouted loudest, who dictated the story. But standing there, in the quiet aftermath, I understood it differently. Power wasn't the scream. It was the silence that followed, the kind that no one could interrupt. I drove home without music. My reflection in the rearview mirror didn't look like the woman who once begged to be seen. She looked steady. Unshaken. Dangerous. When I arrived, I walked into my living room, the one that had once held uncut loneliness, and whispered to the walls, "We made it." And somewhere deep inside the silence, it felt like my father finally answered back. The days that followed felt like the eye of a storm, quiet, too quiet. Reporters still lingered outside my gate, hungry for a quote or a breakdown, but I gave them neither. I'd learned that silence is a kind of wealth. Inside, I walked through the rooms of my house like it was a museum of everything I'd survived. The air felt lighter now, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after years of holding secrets. Still, my mother's last words clung to me, "Check under your pretty little house." It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a direction. 3 nights later, it happened. The phone rang at 11:04 p.m., a restricted number. My gut told me to ignore it, but something in the silence between rings felt intentional. I answered. "Hera Vaughn?" The voice was male, steady, but not Kellen's. It was softer, practiced. "My name is Dr. Alden. I worked with your father." I froze. "Worked, how?" "He anticipated this outcome," the man said. "He left protocols, things that could only activate if you were legally confirmed as his successor. You've reached that point." My hand tightened around the phone. "What kind of protocols?" "Legacy-based," he replied. "Property, data, intellectual rights. But there's one specific item, something your father hid, physically. He instructed me to contact you once the courts recognized your authority." I swallowed hard. "And where is it?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "It's tied to your property deed. The house you live in isn't just a residence, it's the final vault. He designed it himself." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, pulse racing, staring at the house around me. My father hadn't just protected me. He'd built this place for me to finish his work. And the ghosts I thought I'd buried were still whispering beneath my floor. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains like it was daring me to look closer. My father had designed this house, his fingerprints were in the blueprints, the layout, the strange geometry I'd once thought was just artistic quirk. But now it all looked different. Deliberate. I spent hours tracing his patterns. Every detail had a rhythm, the number of steps between the study and the hallway, the symmetry of the windows, the precise alignment of the floorboards. My father never built anything without meaning. Then I saw it, a faint seam behind the bookshelf in the study closet. Not a flaw, but a boundary. A perfect square cut into the wall, barely visible beneath layers of paint. My heart began to pound. I moved the shelves aside, books sliding to the floor. Dust rose in the sunlight like smoke. The seam ran along the baseboard, almost invisible. I crouched, running my fingers along it until I felt something metallic, a latch. When I pressed it, the panel gave a soft click. It opened inward. Behind it was a small recess, lined with aged cedar. Inside sat a lockbox, black, heavy, its surface etched faintly with my father's handwriting. My name. Hara Vaughn. Each letter carved deep, deliberate. My breath hitched. I carried it to my desk and stared at it for a long time. There was no key. No combination. Only a biometric pad, a sleek, modern sensor embedded on the front. My father's engineering. He'd known this day would come. I pressed my thumb against the pad. It blinked red once, then green. The lockbox opened with a hiss, like it had been holding its breath for years. Inside wasn't jewelry or cash. Just a sealed envelope and a small flash drive labeled in my father's unmistakable handwriting. If they betray her. I whispered, you knew. And for the first time I didn't feel haunted by him. I felt armed. The lockbox's interior gleamed with dust motes and memory. My hands trembled as I lifted the flash drive, the small object heavier than any gold inheritance could have been. My father's handwriting, firm, familiar, stared back at me. If they betray her. It wasn't a message. It was a prophecy. I set the drive beside the envelope and took a long, steady breath before opening the latter. Inside were more of my father's notes, written in blue ink, the same kind he always used. Schematics, account numbers, and references to something called Project Vaughn, Legacy Network. At the bottom of the final page, one line stood out. The network extends beyond the family. Names. Transfers. Evidence. If Hera reads this, the storm has arrived. Let her finish it. Finish it. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The screen blinked twice, then filled with folders, dozens of them. Names. Bank routes. Corporate filings. The first one was titled Varen, the next Kellen, then Vaughn/private. Each file was timestamped years before my father's death. He'd known. All of it. The laundering, the shell companies, the alliances that had funded their betrayal. He'd built a map of their corruption and hidden it where they'd never think to look, under the roof of the daughter they'd erased. I sat back, shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. I finally understood why they'd tried so hard to crush me. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about control. My father had left the keys to their undoing, and I was the only one who could turn them. I stared at the screen's glow reflecting in my glass of water, my reflection fractured into shards of light. The quiet in the house no longer felt empty. It felt like applause. And as I clicked the first file, whispering, "For you, Dad," I realized. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was the reckoning they'd raised. Justice didn't come softly. It came like thunder through glass, cracking open the lies they'd lived in for years. The evidence my father left exposed everything, the forged accounts, the hidden partnerships, the network of deceit that stretched far beyond family. When the press released it, the world saw the Vaughn name not as a dynasty but as a cautionary tale. Leon Varen resigned in disgrace. Kellen vanished under investigation. My mother's silence became permanent, the woman who once controlled every story now had none left to tell. Ethan left the city, maybe searching for redemption, maybe just running from the mirror. But I stayed. In the house my father built, on the land he chose. The walls no longer whispered pain, they echoed power, earned and unapologetic. I turned every lesson they tried to bury me with into the foundation I stood on. Wealth wasn't what I inherited. Truth was. And truth, when wielded without fear, is the most dangerous currency of all. Now, when I open the door to my home, I don't see ghosts, I see legacy. And when the night gets too quiet, I sometimes ask the air, would you forgive them? But the silence always answers the same, never. Tell me, if the people who broke you came begging for mercy, would you give it, or make them remember your name forever?